The NFL draft is next week, and that means, well, you should hit that subscribe button here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk so you can hear the best from Joe Goodberry, myself, and really any type of Bengals draft coverage you're looking for on YouTube. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and let's dive into it, Joe, because one of the great debates, dilemmas that I think the Bengals could have on draft night in a perfect world, if everything is rosy, is the top two tight ends. Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, and he's a local kid, went to Covcath, won a state championship 15 minutes from Paycor Stadium. And a guy in Dalton Kincaid who not many people I think knew about during the process, let's say in January, but a lot of people are aware of him now. What are your thoughts on these two guys, the two top tight ends in the class? Because obviously the Bengals are on the tight end hunt at 28 or beyond. They're certainly going to take a tight end in this draft.
Yeah, I think you can make the case that both guys are probably top five receiving options in this entire class. That includes receivers as well, obviously. And I think that's where, in a poor receiver class, especially at the top, is the way it seems with 2 weeks to go heading into the draft. I think teams may value the guys like Mayer and Kincaid and maybe even stretch it to the next few over some of these receivers. And I think that could push both guys up to where they're not even there. But I think if both are there at 28 or even one, we're talking about a guy that's probably going to be very high in the Bengals board.
I agree. And let's start with Mayer because we've had this debate, and the majority of our viewers are going to be on your side here. You would take Mayer. I would take Kincaid. Like if they were both there, I would take Dalton Kincaid. Why would you go with Michael Mayer?
So Mayer's probably one of the safest or cleanest prospects we've seen, not just in this class, I think in a while. Every few years we get a tight end that is just checking every box. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's got the production where he was the number one receiving option for his offense. And they usually get drafted in the top 15 or 20 or so in those classes, their respective classes. Mayer seems like he could end up on the back half of that, which we're talking about at pick 28. And I think that's largely because he came in at average size, average athleticism overall, but still good enough for all of that. I think at the end of the day, if you like Michael Mayer, it's because he is incredibly clean. His film is incredibly clean. He can do everything. You can plug him in day one as a starter and not have to change anything about your offense. He can do everything from blocking on the run, blocking on the line of scrimmage, in line as a wide type tight end. He can run option routes. He can be split out wide. He can be effective in a play action game where he's got to pass protect or leak out and do something after the catch. Very good hands. Just super productive in an offense and where the defense knew he was getting the ball and they still couldn't stop him.
That is a big part of it. And one of the big pros, I think, for Mayer is you look at that Notre Dame offense. It's not like there were a bunch of Golden Tates running around for Notre Dame. Like he was
Not even any Will Fullers.
Or Will Fuller, right? He was the guy. And so I agree with you there. And I think he's a heck of a prospect. I think this would be a great problem to have. This would be first world Bengals weapons problems in obviously a great way. To me, if both were there, the reason I would take Kincaid, this is the same offense. And they won't come out and fully say it, but I'll say it and you know it. You watch them just as close as anybody. They went up to Foxborough at Gillette, and Joe Burrow had 40 completions, ties a Bengals record. They're going to throw it if it's 0 out, if it's 52 out, if it's a hailstorm. They like throwing the ball. And as safe as Mayer is, and I would agree he's safe, I think where's the special? And I'm not saying maybe he ends up being a Pro Bowler, maybe. But to me, Dalton Kincaid, and you've watched him, it doesn't take a football genius to see, oh, that guy could be a difference maker. And you talk about plug and play day one. Would they have to tweak their offense? I'm sure, because he's a really good weapon. And I think would make this, one, Joe Burrow very, very happy, but make this offense that much harder to defend. And that's what I look for. Tyler Boyd in the last year of his deal, they're going to need to replace that somehow. And I get it. They run a lot of 11 personnel. Well, maybe that changes a bit. Maybe you don't go 3 wide all the time, or maybe Kincaid just takes that aspect. But I think he's a willing blocker, not a good one, a willing one. And I think he's the best pass catcher in this class outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Let me make sure I feel that I think that's fair. So if he's there, I would take him. Outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't
Yeah,
think there's a better pass catcher in this class. I'm comfortable saying that.
I'm comfortable agreeing with that. And I don't want to sell Kincaid too much here if we're going to try and make a mini debate out of this, but
No, it's okay. It's a good discussion. It's not, this isn't first take.
right.
We're good.
That's true. He would fit the offense perfectly. He would be Hayden Hurst, where you're not asking him to be in the line. I mean, Hayden Hurst split out wide and went into the slot half of his snaps last year. They would do the exact same with Dalton Kincaid because he's not much of a blocker. If you put on that first few weeks of Utah tape, especially the one against Florida, they just ragdoll him all day. I mean, he's just not going to be that inline kind of guy. But he is an effective move blocker where he's got to climb up, get a linebacker, get a piece of a safety or a nickel corner, and he can get him out of the way. He'd be a better blocker than your average slot receiver because of his size and strength. So you would gain something if he became that third receiving option in this offense in a year or two, once Tyler Boyd is gone. So I think you're right. I think his ball skills, his hands, the way he high points the ball, for a smaller guy, because he's not the biggest, he's 6'3" and some change, are at an elite level. And that's something that you mix with Joe Burrow and his accuracy, I think would be a tremendous fit. On the other hand, Michael Mayer is 2 years younger and produced at such a high level that it dwarfs Kincaid's production, especially at the same age. When Kincaid was Michael Mayer's age, he only had 3 targets and 1 catch that year. But then even in the years around that, he wasn't even close. I mean, he just now saw the bulk of his production at age 23 in Utah. And I think it took a tight end ahead of him getting hurt before they really realized what they had in him. It looked like it took half a year before they said, okay, we know what Dalton Kincaid is now, and Utah hit their stride. Utah, if you watch the whole season, was very much like that. And then towards the end, when they're playing like USC and he's catching 16 balls, I mean, just absolutely torching them. I would say that's a positive. That's the best game to watch if you're into Dalton Kincaid, but it's also about 25% of his receiving production all in one game, where Michael Mayer is spread out through the year. And you know what it reminds me of? And I think you would like this, and maybe Bengals fans would too. In an offense where he was the primary weapon, this is Michael Mayer, he reminds me a lot of Mark Andrews, where they still had to figure out ways to get him the ball. And in the Ravens offense, right, a lot of times it's like, Mark Andrews is getting it on third down. Try to stop him. And think of the Notre Dame-Cincinnati game where it's third downs, multiple third and fourth downs, and they isolate Michael Mayer, and he just undresses Scott at safety or gets open on an out route, right? And it's like he is more athletic and quicker than I think people assume. I just think he's such an easy evaluation that people get bored by it. But I think he's going to be a very good tight end.
I agree. And that's the part of it where there isn't much of a debate. Like, I'm not saying Mayer's bad, and it would be a great player to have.
Mm-hmm.
I also, if you had to, which one's more like, who has the higher ceiling? We've talked about floor and safe. And part of that is Kincaid's back. Look, if he clears the medicals, that's really all you can do. I think that he's cleared the Bengals medicals. They met with him at the combine and brought him in for a pre-draft visit as well, a top 30. They did with Michael Mayer as well.
Yeah.
Ceiling wise. All right. So Mark Andrews for Michael Mayer, who would you say is the ceiling for Dalton Kincaid?
At best, if he hit every marker, he could be I don't want to compare him to maybe the best that's currently out there, but very similar to Travis Kelce in terms of he's going to be a slot guy. You're going to move him around a lot. You're going to keep him off the line. He could do a little bit of blocking, get himself in the way. But his ability to run routes, get in and out of breaks, transition from a receiver to a runner in a flash, all very reminiscent of Travis Kelce. Now, those are like upside projections. Both are 2 top 5 tight ends in the league right now. We would be happy with either one of those. When we go through the entire process, because Kincaid had an injured back, he wasn't able to work out or test before the combine or before the draft even gets here or at the combine. And that puts a risk in his profile because typically tight ends end up scoring well that are the good tight ends in the NFL. We're talking about, if you use relative athletic score, we're talking 8.5 or better. Your chances of finding a tight end 1 have increased dramatically. So we don't have that. We think he would have tested well, but we don't have that for sure. So you got that risk, and then you have the profile risk of the production, especially when you adjust it for age. It spits him out as he's got a chance to be a Pro Bowler, but not a multi-time Pro Bowler. Michael Mayer's, everything comes across the board. He just misses the mark of like an all-pro athletic tight end, but he hits the marks in production and with his age for a multiple-time Pro Bowler. So if we talk about upside, there are some factors that may limit Dalton Kincaid's upside. Maybe he's a guy that always has injuries. Maybe he's a guy that always is only one-dimensional in an offense, and now his upside is limited.
It's interesting. And I feel like a lot of people now are like, all right, Michael Mayer, closer to all pro. And yet we find ourselves on different sides of the spectrum. Now, let's account for the other people that are saying, screw tight end at 28, or are saying Darnell Washington at 28, or Luke Musgrave if he's there at 60, or Tucker Kraft or Sam Laporta. If the Bengals took either of these guys, Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, 28th overall, would that be, and I know we don't know what the other 27 picks are, but would that be okay from a value standpoint, knowing what else is in this class tight end wise? Would you feel comfortable with both of these guys?
Until you said value, I was going to agree and say it'd be okay. The value is a tough part of it. It's like taking tight end or running backs. Everything points to recent draft history of you should not touch either one in the first round. Your chances of finding the best guy that matches the best value is in rounds 2 through 4 at both positions. So you only want to do it in a fallback scenario, in my opinion. Like the top 3 or 4 corners, whatever you feel, are gone. Kalijah Cansey's gone. Darnell Wright's gone. Right? These guys that you're like, I'll take them all day. They're premium position.
And they could be.
And
this is a realistic potential, situation that they could be in.
Exactly. So you get there and you're like, hey, all those guys are gone. Mayer's gone. Kincaid's there. Great. Take it. I have no problem with that at all in any scenario. I think that's fine if those premium positions and players are gone. But the other half of the value question is, yeah, if you can get Laporta or Musgrave or Kraft at 60, well, geez, I'd like to spend a different pick at 28 then and go back in time and even take that fourth corner if that's whoever that may be. If it's Cam Smith from South Carolina, who I think is worth a first-round pick. But, yeah, or Tommy Adebawore, the defensive end tackle from Northwestern. Like, I would – if I could swap those out and get Laporta at 60, I feel much better about that draft in that direction. It's just because of the value of tight end is lessened.
And Laporta might not be there. He's one of these weird ones where he might not make it to 60. He could be picked at 48, and
he could be picked in the top 40. So
he could. I think NFL teams are higher on him than people realize right now. And it would not shock me, since we're on tight end, if he went ahead of Darnell Washington.
I was with you. We were mind melding right there. I was going to say the
same thing. We really?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. And that will shock a lot of people if it happens. For more draft coverage, make sure you follow Joe Goodberry on Twitter at Joe Goodberry. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and buckle up, because we're going to have you covered wall-to-wall Bengals draft right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk.